Hi, I'm Ashley Adamson, and today we're going to talk about the transition timeline, or like how you kind of think about um, the mentality of transitioning as you move through different stages. So I'm going to be showing you a graph that I'm overlaying with another graph. I just looked at this 5 stages of business growth, and thought it was actually really similar to the graph that I made for my book around transitioning and what you go through as you transition. So I thought this would be really cool to show to you and share sort of like how this maps to your transition, and think about where you are on this timeline, because having an idea of where you are on the timeline, where you're at, and some of the things that you're going through might be able to help you maintain a certain level of mental clarity, mental resilience, and willingness to just keep going, because that's probably the hardest part. Is sometimes when you feel down and you feel like you just don't want to get up, it's hard to get back up, and the longer that takes for you to get back up, the more difficult life is to get back into, right? Like, have you ever had those feelings where you've felt like you were really pushed down, and then you just were like, okay, I think I'll just stay in bed and I won't get back up for a while, and I'll just hang out on my phone or something like that. You know what I mean? So like, that's kind of like the number one thing that I've run into as a trans lifeline operator, is when you get people who are calling in suicidal or feeling like it's the end of their line. It's really just like me helping them figuring out that they can be more resilient so that they can get back up and to really kind of try at it again. I mean, being trans right now is like this weird, we're in this weird like dualistic state where it's more easy than ever to transition, but at the same time, there's so much political discourse and discussion and scapegoating on trans people that you can also feel super targeted. There are motions in politics that are actually making it harder to transition in certain states. But there is a wealth of knowledge. There is a lot of accessibility. If you know where you can get information, you can speak to the right people, or if you can make the right moves. Like informed consent is a thing, to get hormones. And I'm trans DIY at the moment, and you can also figure that out as well. But that's another topic. I was talking to my therapist yesterday, and he's like, how much is your transition affecting you? And when I responded to that, like, I mean, just take a second to think about this for you. Like, how much is your transition affecting you? I assume that because you're watching this video, it must be affecting you to some degree, or you're just a fan of me and you like hearing me talk now, but, or I'm creating some kind of value for you. Because I know I talk to cis people as well, and they watch these videos and they find value. So like, I will talk about this as specific as it is to trans, but you can imagine that there's a lot of extrapolations that you can take from this video. So that's kind of like actually probably a good segue into talking about this graph here or this graph here. Maybe we'll start with this graph here because this is the easier graph to digest. So this is a graph that I made for my my book, and you can get that book. It's the trans.club. You can buy it there. You can buy it on my website. Please support me. You can also buy it on Amazon, but I only make like $1 if you buy it on Amazon. I make about 50% of the purchase price if you buy it on my website. So yeah, so this is kind of like, let's say, baseline right here, and then you kind of figure out, if I were to kind of like label this is happiness, right? And then you could say happiness here is the baseline, and then it goes up, and then it goes down. So we have the baseline right around here. This is the baseline, okay? So that's pretty stark, right? Because you see that there's a lot down here. And that's kind of, I mean, that is a transition, right? Like, you are going through a lot of heavy stuff. It's requiring a lot of work. You're going to feel pretty low at times. You may have already hit your lowest low. But the good news is when you look at this, it kind of starts to get better and better until you eventually make your way out of what I call the trough of despair, which is right around here. This is the trough of despair. This is like the bad stuff. This is the worst part. And then you'll make your way out. Now, in my book, I kind of talk a little bit more about how that looks in all the different stages. But suffice to say, on just like a higher level, it's kind of like this is the moment right here. Maybe I'll use a different color. This is the moment right here where you discover that you don't have to be the gender that you're assigned, and perhaps you can experiment or figure things out. So at that point, you get all of this happiness because you go, oh my God, I don't have to be oppressed in the way that I have been oppressing myself. Like, what have you said to yourself that made you feel like you were not able to be who you actually are? And then how did that feel once you discovered that you did not have to be what people told you you had to be? Like, that's kind of life-changing, right? So that's here, right here. And so you go, oh, yippee, this is great. Like, I'm so happy that I can express myself. Maybe this is kind of like where you start buying clothes. Like for me, this is where I started buying women's clothes and wearing them, get some panties, get some pantyhose, get some lingerie. You see where I'm going? You see where I'm going with this? I'm not really going there, but I couldn't help myself. But then eventually, at some point I'm like, okay, like now I can go out and I can make friends and this is great and this is fantastic. But then at some point you go, okay, like now I know this is reality. Like now you will know at some point this is no longer fantasy. This is no longer just playing around. You know that you are actually trans and that you now are living in a reality where the whole world has kind of shifted to, well, what does my world look like now that I know that I'm trans? And maybe some of you already know that you're trans and you were just kind of born that way. So maybe that might look like, well, what do I do now in order to support my situation in where I'm at? That kind of stuff, right? So this is where you begin the plunge. This is the plunge down because reality sinks in and now you have to figure out what to do in order to make your life better. And maybe this is kind of like the moment where you go, okay, like now I need to figure out hormones and that's taking time, that's effort, and you get blocked here, you get blocked there. And it just goes down and down and down because you're just facing all of this stuff. Like this is what I would just call right here is like caused by emotional debt that you didn't know you had, that you have to pay down now because you have come to the realization that you need to pay this debt. So it's a crash. It's a really hard crash because there's all this stuff that you realize that you need to take on. If you're watching this video, I'm going to guess that you're probably not here. You're probably somewhere around here. This is probably where you're at because you've already worked through this like downward spiral a bit. And now you're like, okay, now I need to figure out how to get out of this trough because this trough sucks and I want my life to just be better. I mean, like, what are you saying to yourself? Like, what are some of those feelings that you're working through and where are you at currently in your transition? Are you kind of here or are you kind of here or are you kind of here? Like, where are you, So how can I make this bigger by any chance? Like, does this get bigger? Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay, sweet. I'm just going to put myself over there because this is nice. You kind of make yourself now. This kind of up and down motion is really just the gender euphoria, but then like kind of having these smaller reality hits of, okay, like I now need to figure out how to do this or that. So like you may be able to change your name and you may get to come out and tell some people and you get accepted. So that's a little bump up. But then you have someone that misgenders you, you feel invalidated, you feel like maybe you'll never pass, I'm speaking from my own experience too, you'll never pass, you'll never find someone who loves you, you're unlovable, all the terrible thoughts, and that just sends you further and further down. And somewhere in the early stages, you kind of hit what I would call the worst part of the trough, like the deep, deep, dark hole. And while this is just a bump, like the actual graph of how that may feel like this. It can go pretty deep. You can go pretty far down there. And this is typically where I'm answering calls from people on Trans Lifeline. Sometimes these dips here can also be very, very deep. And so it might be like a prompt to call Trans Lifeline here and here and here. It's important to know how to avoid falling into these pits so that they don't get super, super deep. And the best way to do that is through finding community, having friends, and what is the other one? Having resilience strategies in place. I might be paraphrasing or getting this incorrect, but this is essentially what you need to have. And community is like having a larger community that you feel connected to. So that might be a community you find on Reddit. That might be the Trans Club, which is my club. Or that might be even just me speaking to you on YouTube. That might also be the LGBT Center, wherever that is, going to Pride, like this kind of stuff. Like having a sense of a community is so important because it's going to give you a sense of togetherness, and then other people to talk to. Friends, they may not be trans. Having friends that are not trans is totally fine. I didn't have any trans friends to start with because I didn't know any trans people. Of course, I was able to make trans friends over time. My current way of making trans friends is using Grindr, but you can also use the Trans Club. That's another way that I've actually made trans friends. And of course, as my YouTube. Earlier in the days, you could also do Craigslist casual meetups, which is where you could meet people, but they removed that function. Of course, you can use other social media as well to make friends, but this is what's worked for me. Instagram as well. I've DM'd people who are in my local area. And then resilience strategies. That's pretty much everything that my YouTube is about, aside from the sex content. But you could say that the sex content is also somewhat related because I mean, like, you want to enjoy sex, right? Like, that's also affecting your mental health. But resilience strategies is all the personal growth, the mentality. And this is where, like, I talk about the warrior mindset. This is where you kind of beat back the trough. Like, the trough has, like, an octopus that's, like, trying to pull you down into these, like, deep, deep holes. And you go, fuck no, I'm not going down there. I just spit on the screen. I'm going to slay that demon, and I'm going to step over this kind of like deeper crevice, right? So you can kind of just make your way this way rather than falling through them as deep. And the resilience strategies are a large part of that. If you cannot make it through any of those things, that's when you really need to call someone and get some help. That's where you call the Trans Lifeline or something else. So yeah, I've gone in a lot in depth in timeline. I think there's just one more thing worth mentioning here before we move over to this other one, which I think is really interesting, which is that you are going to move up. You are going to move up, but like oftentimes there's false starts. So don't feel bad if you feel like you're knocked down. And this is not just like a one-hit thing. Like this can repeat on and on and on. The purpose of this graph is for illustration purposes and conceptually the different stages. Like there's the trough stage, there's the getting out of trough stage, and then there's like the ascendance stage. Where I'm at right now, I feel like I am somewhere around here. I'm at my 4.5 year, or I think I'm approaching my 5-year mark actually. And the reason why I'm not done is because I need a vagina. And that is coming next year. And once that vagina is in place, I don't really think I have any other work to be done. Like I had my my FFS, which was, I would say my FFS and BA kind of was around here on my journey. FFS and BA kind of just like helped me really accelerate out of this trough of feeling invalid, feeling like I didn't look good, hating my face, not liking what I saw in the mirror, and just like really just having like really good resilience strategies. But like your subconscious is your subconscious, and it's really hard to recalibrate the neurological, the neurology of your brain. So with that, let's just kind of move over this one really quick because I find this to be super interesting. So I work with a coaching group that they coach me in helping me stay maximally productive. And they showed me this because I'm working on a business right now. They showed me this, which is like the 5 business phases that you go through. And I find this to be really interesting because as soon as they showed this to me, I was like, oh, okay, this is exactly what I just talked about. Uninformed optimism. This is like the stage where you feel more optimistic and you feel good about things because you don't know what you don't know. That's the same here, right? You feel great, but you don't really know what you don't know. And then suddenly you know a lot of things and then things go down, right? So uninformed optimism, that's right there. And then at some point you know enough that you are informed, but now you've become pessimistic because it feels like too much or it feels a little bit more difficult. And so now you're in the phase 2 of informed pessimism. Things are not so good. This is the valley of despair, which we've already covered, which is now you are maximally informed. You've put in as much effort as you can, but you're not really seeing the results that you want to get, or you have things that are knocking you down. Of course, as you execute over time, you start to really reap the benefits of that exponential curve if you're consistent. And that's where you then become more optimistic and you now know how to do things. And then eventually you get into success and fulfillment because you've achieved what you want to achieve, which is right out here. Everyone loves the up and to the right graph, especially in startups. And you could probably raise a lot of money on this kind of a graph. But I think the most interesting thing that I learned when I was speaking to my coach, which is something that maybe I didn't allude to so well here, is this part. The valley of despair. The valley of despair, the only way that they recommend to get out of the valley of despair is to keep executing. And like, I found this to be very validating because this is essentially what I have told people in my videos to do when they feel like at their absolute worst, is to just keep moving, keep going, keep stepping forward. Like, if you are feeling down, if you feel like you've hit that trough, you just need to keep moving. Your brain is not cooperating with you. Your system is not cooperating with you. You are feeling absolutely shitty, right? Like, when you're at this moment in time, what do you do? How do you get through it? Well, you either don't get through it by just like saying, all right, this is too much, I'm not going to do it. You get through it by saying, all right, this is too much, but I'm going to keep moving forward. Or, you know, there's like, I guess one other path, but we're not going to speak about that path because that path is you just quitting and giving up on things. And so like, really there's two options, which is like stop playing the game and take a break, or play the game and keep going and keep moving forward. And that's where I want to say it feels like 70%, 30%, like 70% of the time you want to just keep moving through that thing and just keep going. Okay, like I'm feeling really shitty today. Like I had this moment in Thailand where I had a really great date with a guy who didn't know that I was trans. He found out I was trans and immediately blocked me and like ghosted me. And he was so genuinely honest and a great person, or seemed like that. But then suddenly I'm trans and that transforms the entire relationship. And you can kind of see that those kind of reassessments or those reminders of you being trans and how that comes in between you and the rest of the world. I mean, like, how do you feel when you get these reminders of how you cannot engage with the world as just a regular person because you are being seen as trans? Like you go, oh, like those moments where you go, oh, I'm trans. And so what I'm seeing here is that I can't engage as a normal person because I am trans. It's because I am trans that I'm not able to be a normal person now. And I feel that this, especially with dating, and I feel it especially with certain places where I might not be safe, right? Like where do you feel that? So on a day like that, I was feeling pretty down and I was just like, I just want to quit. I don't want to make a YouTube video. I don't want to do any work. Like, this is bad. And on that day, I just kind of said, well, I could keep executing, which is one way of approaching it and how I would normally approach it. But sometimes that doesn't make sense because maybe I'm just exhausted. Maybe this is just going to be more antithetical to me making more productivity. So the other option, which I say do it 30% of the time, is to just throw it aside, take a break, do something completely different. Because sometimes you can be grinding on this progression system where it's just such a grind that you're really not going to make much progress and it's not going to do a lot for your mental health. So, you know, 70% of the time, keep executing, keep going this way, keep going that way, keep moving. But 70% of the time when you run into issues, maybe you need to actually just go a completely different direction and go like outside, go on a walk, go on a hike, go on a picnic, just hang out with a friend and forget your transition, forget being trans, just play video games, just do something that gives you a break. And then once you're ready, come back and then execute again and move forward on that. So, yeah, I think we'll close up the video there. That's kind of like a little bit about the trans timeline. I'm gonna have to make another video about how being trans affects me because we ran out of time for today. Let me know what you thought of this video in the comments below. And if you want to support me, please become a member. I'd appreciate it. Thanks again. Bye.